When the news of my husband's death in the war came, everyone was waiting to see me, a love-struck widow, make a fool of myself. After all, because I loved him, I had served his paralyzed mother for 6 years like a dog, without any status or position, and had taken care of her in her old age until her death. But the day after the funeral, I remarried the officer, who came back to the village to visit his relatives in mourning clothes. No one knew that I was reborn. In my previous life, my sister-in-law and her child were taken away in a grand manner. My son and I were bullied in the village. With nowhere else to go, we went to the city to ask my uncle for help, but I saw my husband, who had been dead for 5 years, hugging my sister-in-law and teasing their child. It turned out that it was my uncle who died on the battlefield, and it was my husband who took over my uncle's credit and took my sister-in-law away. I came here with my child because I was angry. My husband sold us into the mountains. My son and I were tortured to death. In this life, I decisively let my son call someone else dad. 5 years later, at my father-in-law's mourning hall, I met my ex-husband and sister-in-law who came to mourn. In the mourning hall, Amon and I were pale from days of vigil, and Nathan was still busy with the funeral. Before leaving, he told us to have a good rest. At this moment, a shrill laughter came. Jonathan, who had faked his death, walked in with Diana and their son. When he saw the haggard appearance of our mother and son, he was stunned at first, and then turned his face away guiltily. Seeing that I didn't react at all, Jonathan was not happy. He strode over and glared at me condescendingly, with a bit of annoyance in his tone. "Ellie, I haven't seen you for a few years, and this is your reaction when you see me?" I wanted to laugh when he asked me. It was him who faked his death and abandoned my mother and son, and now it is him who is questioning us. Should I be like a dog in his eyes, rushing up to him and wagging my tail for mercy when I see him come back to life, and continue to let him order me around? I raised my eyes and looked at him calmly. What attitude did my eldest brother want me to have? Jonathan suddenly froze. Only then did he realize that he was almost exposed. His face changed, and he coughed calmly, pretending to be calm, and didn't say anything. But Amon suddenly tugged at my sleeve, raised his little face and asked, "Mom, who are they?" Amon really didn't know Jonathan. After all, from childhood to adulthood, I only told him that his father was a hero who sacrificed his life for his country, but I never showed him a photo of Jonathan. We didn't have the chance to know each other before, and there is no need to recognize each other now. In Brian's life, Nathan is his only father. That's enough. I picked up my son and said lightly, "I don't know him." Jonathan stopped us and pointed at Brian and said angrily, "I don't know him? He is my brother's son." Jonathan's face was gloomy, but he didn't dare to admit his identity. I ignored him and said softly to Brian, "Let's go and see if Dad is back." Brian nodded obediently and put his little hands around my neck. I was about to leave without even bothering to glance at them, but Diana stopped me at this time. Her tears came faster than the weather changed, and her voice was choked with hypocritical sobs. "Sister-in-law, I know it's not easy for you to raise a child alone in the countryside all these years. Blame me and your eldest brother for not helping you. But it's not easy for your eldest brother and me to be in the army all these years. You have to understand us." Watching Diana come to the funeral, she was reluctant to take off the gold bracelet. In this age, when most people can't get enough to eat, her son is fat and strong. I almost laughed out loud. They have it easy, so what did I suffer in the village in my previous life compared to that? In the previous life, Jonathan faked his death to escape and brought my eldest sister-in-law and her son into the compound to enjoy a good life, but left Brian and me to fend for ourselves in the village. In those years, I had to put a kitchen knife under my pillow when I slept at night for fear that hooligans would kick the door. Brian was chased by the children in the village and called a fatherless bastard. I wanted to seek justice, but someone poured a bucket of swill on my head and called me a jinx. I lived like this for 5 years. If I hadn't been forced to live, how could I have taken Brian to the city to find my uncle? But when we arrived in the city, we found out that Jonathan, who was said to have died in the battle, was hugging Diana and playing with my eldest sister-in-law's child. It turned out that it was his eldest brother who died on the battlefield. He pretended to be the hero, replaced the eldest brother's identity, and worshipped my eldest sister-in-law like a treasure, but pushed my son and me into hell. Just because we showed up suddenly, he was afraid that the matter would be exposed, so he turned around and sold us into the mountains. Jonathan suddenly interrupted my memories and raised his chin like alms. Okay, I know it's hard for you to live with the child. Considering your infatuation with my brother, I'll give you a chance. From now on, you can come to our house as a nanny and serve Diana. I almost laughed out loud when I saw him continue to pretend. Nathan didn't even want me to wash the dishes at home. How could this man have the face to let me be a servant? I glanced at them coldly. If you are here to see off the old commander, you can go. The memorial service is over. Jonathan's face sank, and he was about to get angry when Diana's son suddenly screamed and rushed towards Brian, reaching out to grab the badge in his hand. That was the relic left to Brian by the old commander. The old man really treated Brian as his own grandson and even gave him this badge, with special meaning. Although Brian was tired, he had been training with Nathan since he was a child, and his reaction was very fast. He pushed away the child who was 2 years older than him. Diana's son fell to the ground, pointing at Brian and screaming, "How dare you push me? Do you know who my dad is? I'll let my dad beat you to death. Dad, give me the thing quickly. I want what he has in his hand. Give it to me quickly. Give it to me quickly." I thought it was just a joke of the naughty kid, but I didn't expect Jonathan to actually rush forward and slap Brian in the face. As soon as Jonathan's slap landed, he pointed at us mother and son viciously. "You have been taught badly by your mother. How dare you hit your brother for a broken thing? In the city, children like you who don't respect their elders would have been beaten to death long ago. Since you were born by your mother but not taught by your father, I, as your uncle, will teach you a lesson on behalf of your father." Seeing that he was about to attack, I rushed forward and protected Brian behind me, saying word by word, "What qualifications do you have to hit my son? Nathan has grown up and you have never fed him a bite of food or changed his diaper. Now you act like an elder? What's more, he is the one who snatched my son's things. Who is more uneducated? You know it in your heart." Brian covered his face and hid in my arms. The half of his profile that was exposed was exactly the same as Nathan's, carved out of the same mold as Jonathan. Jonathan stared at the face that looked like his own, his expression slightly moved. Diana suddenly hugged her son and cried, "Sister-in-law, if you are angry, come to me. Don't hurt my son." Curtis had just noticed that the military medal was unusual, thinking that ordinary children couldn't have it. Amon stood up to refute, with a slap mark on his face. "This was given to me by my grandfather." Jonathan's face suddenly changed when he heard it. He had been in the army for many years. How could he not recognize that this was Mr. Jonathan's badge? He immediately assumed Amon had stolen it. "My father died a long time ago. Where did you get your grandfather? This must have been stolen by you." He pushed me away and rudely snatched the military medal. "I didn't steal it. This is mine." Amon rushed to grab it but was kicked away by him. I hugged Amon in my arms, my voice trembling. "This is my son's thing. Give it back to me quickly. It is obviously Mr. Jonathan's. The child you raised is not only uneducated, but also has dirty hands and feet." Jonathan turned around and handed the badge to Diana's son. The boy took it. "We're helping Commander Nathan catch the thief." Diana's eyes were full of pride. Her voice couldn't hide the gloating. "Don't be angry, sister-in-law. Jianjun is doing this for your own good. After all, if Commander Nathan knew you stole his father's things, he'd probably send you to the police station in a rage. But Jianjun is different. Commander Jonathan's capable subordinate. Now Curtis has made another contribution and caught your son stealing. Maybe Commander Nathan will be so happy he'll promote Jianjun directly." I sneered inwardly. Although Nathan holds a high position, he never puts on airs in front of me. Whenever it doesn't involve important matters, from personnel transfers to new recruits making fools of themselves, he always rubs my sore shoulders and whispers to me when he gets home. But I have never heard him mention Bevis. Is that right? Why haven't I heard Nathan mention him? Diana crossed her arms, wearing a sarcastic look. "Who do you think you are? A countrywoman like you is worthy of knowing all this." I looked at her calmly and said each word clearly. "I am his wife." Diana laughed shrilly, as if she had heard the biggest joke in the world. Who in the army doesn't know how much Commander Nathan loves his wife and child? He fell in love with his wife at first sight. After they got married, he insisted on picking her up and dropping her off at work every day. Young Master Nathan is even more precious grew up in the compound. It's said that Mr. Nathan personally trained him, and he could shoot moving targets at age 5. Who do you and your son think you are? How dare you pretend to be them? Chief Nathan hates others spreading rumors about his family affairs the most. If your words get out, it will ruin Jianjun. Jonathan was instantly furious when he heard this. Chief Nathan can decide my future with one sentence. You're talking nonsense here. Do you want me to never get promoted in this life? I didn't want to argue anymore. I pulled him on and was about to leave. Seeing this, Diana immediately shouted at Jonathan. Jianjun, stop her quickly. If she runs out and talks nonsense again, your future will be completely over. Jonathan's face turned uglier. He grabbed my hair and forced me to look up. Women are the most vicious. What on earth are you trying to do? I frowned in pain and couldn't say a word. Amon rushed over and hit his legs. Let go of my mother. Jonathan raised his foot and kicked Amon. I tried to break free with one hand, shielding Brian behind me. Jonathan was completely enraged. He swung his arm and slapped me hard across the face. The sound of the slap was especially harsh in the morning hall. I staggered back, my stomach hitting the altar heavily. The intense pain made me curl up. There was a metallic taste in my throat. I wiped the corner of my mouth and saw blood. When Brian saw me being beaten, his small body suddenly rushed up and opened his arms to shield me. Nathan had taught him well. At just 5 years old, he stood tall and straight like a young poplar tree. This was the result of Nathan taking him to practice military posture in the yard every morning. Even the angle of his toes was exactly the same as Nathan's. He turned to me, his childish voice tense, but trying hard to imitate Nathan's reassuring tone. Don't be afraid, Mom. Dad said, I'm a man and I must protect Mom. Every word from Brian was clear and firm, but to Jonathan, it was like a dagger stabbing into his chest. In that moment, he was completely infuriated. No longer pretending to be the kindly uncle, his face twisted with rage. He grabbed Brian by the collar. I am your biological father. When did I teach you to talk to your biological father like this? Brian was lifted off the ground, but he looked up stubbornly. You are not my father. My father is Nathan. He'll be here soon. He'll arrest all of you and throw you in solitary confinement. His last 3 words mimicked Nathan's usual tone when scolding people, and it landed like a loud slap across Jonathan's face. You bastard. You still want to call Officer Nathan your father, as if you're even worthy? Let me tell you, if I recognize you, you're my son. If I don't, you're worse than a stray dog. With that, he threw Brian out. The back of Brian's head struck the sharp corner of the altar with a sickening thud. Blood gushed from his forehead as his small body curled up on the ground in pain, then went completely still, lying in a pool of blood, motionless. Brian! I rushed forward to pick up my son, but Diana stepped in front of me. She pretended to stagger back, covering her untouched shoulder. My shoulder, she cried, leaning into Jonathan's arms with fake tears as if terribly wronged. Jianjun, don't blame your sister-in-law. She definitely didn't mean it. Jonathan's face darkened. He grabbed my wrist so hard I thought my bones would snap. Ellie, are you looking for death? I couldn't break free, so I stared at him. Let me go. Aw, man is bleeding. He sneered, filled with malice. So, what if he's bleeding? He won't die. Today I'll show you the consequences of bullying Diana. He grabbed my hair and yanked it back. I felt my scalp being torn. He raised his hand to slap me again. I gasped in pain. Then he slapped me again. My ears buzzed and half my face went numb. I clung to the wall, struggling to stay on my feet. My eyes went black for a while, and I suddenly caught a glimpse of a commotion at the entrance of the morning hall. Nathan was walking in with a few officers. I closed my eyes in despair and shouted out the only name that could give me a sense of security. Nathan. I was about to call for help, but Diana reacted immediately and covered my mouth. She anxiously growled at Jonathan. Come and stop her. She already knows your true identity. We can't let her tell Chief Nathan that you replaced Jianjun. Jonathan also reacted, and he and Diana held my arms on the left and right. The force was so strong that I gasped. He leaned close to my ear and lowered his voice. "Ellie, you behave yourself today. Tomorrow I will arrange a car to pick you up in the city and find you a place to live so that you can enjoy life in the city." I was trembling all over, not because of fear, but because of anger. He said the same thing in his previous life. As a result, the van that entered the city drove directly into the depths of the mountains. I still remember the touch of those rough and greasy palms wandering on my body, the disgusting breath spraying on my skin, and the heart-wrenching cries of a man before he died. Perhaps it was the overwhelming hatred that gave me the strength to resist. I suddenly raised my foot and stomped hard on Jonathan's instep. When he let go of me in pain, I used my elbow to hit Diana's ribs. This was the self-defense technique that Nathan taught me. "Nathan, save us." I rushed out screaming, my throat breaking. 20 meters away, Nathan, who was talking to several superiors, turned his head suddenly. His eyes swept over me with blood on my face, over Brian, who was unconscious on the ground, and finally landed on Jonathan's hand that was still hanging in the air. I clearly saw his pupils suddenly contract and his face turn ashen in an instant. He pushed away the staff officer who was reporting and strode towards us. When Jonathan saw Nathan coming over, his body suddenly froze and he hurriedly saluted. "Hello, sir." His voice trembled and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Nathan didn't even look at him. He just stretched out his hand and pushed. Jonathan was pushed back several steps and his back hit the altar heavily. A few plates of offerings were knocked over. I was so weak that I could hardly stand. Nathan's strong arms pulled me into his. He still had the winter chill from outside, but his arms were warm and strong. I grabbed his clothes, my voice trembling. "Nathan, save Brian quickly." Nathan immediately let go of me, walked quickly to Brian and squatted down. He carefully checked the wound on Brian's forehead. His face became uglier and uglier. "Prepare the car now," he roared towards the door, then gently picked up Brian. When passing by Jonathan, Nathan stopped. His voice was frighteningly cold. "Bevis, this is not over yet." Jonathan's legs went weak, and he sat directly on the ground. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Nathan didn't look at him again. He held Brian and walked out quickly. I wanted to go to the hospital with him, but I couldn't move. Several military families were called over by the officers who had just talked with Nathan. They understood how much I loved my son and quickly supported me. We usually live in the same family compound and have a good relationship. One of them said softly, "Madam Jonathan, we will accompany you there." Before leaving the morning hall, Diana suddenly rushed over to block our way. Her face was pale, and her lips were trembling. "You are really the superior's wife." Several ladies immediately stood in front of me to prevent Diana from hurting me. The oldest, Madame Cara, said coldly, "How dare you speak to the superior's wife like this? No matter who you are, you dare to speak to the superior's wife like this." Diana seemed not to hear, and stared at me. "Impossible. You are just a widow with a burden. How can you be worthy?" I slapped Diana with all my strength. "Diana, if your mouth is still so stinky, I don't mind tearing your mouth apart." I looked at Jonathan, who was stunned in place with fear, and gritted my teeth. "What you owe me and Brian, I will get it back from you one by one in the future." Diana covered her face, but dared not say another word. "Let's go." I nodded to the ladies and didn't even look at Diana when I walked past her. When I arrived at the hospital, Brian had been sent to the emergency room for rescue. Nathan was standing in the corridor and came up to me immediately when he saw me. He called the nurse over, his voice still filled with suppressed anger. "Nurse, check her." The nurse carefully cleaned the wound on my face. Nathan stood beside me, frowning. I saw his hands hanging at his sides clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white. I patted his clenched fists, signaling that I was fine. He held my hand with his backhand and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, I came too late." I shook my head. "It's not your fault. It's Jonathan who is too rampant. He dared to treat us like this because no one knew his true identity." Nathan suddenly looked up when he heard this. "Didn't Jonathan die 5 years ago?" I let out a breath, and then I told him the secret that had been hidden in my heart for 5 years. The one who died that year was his eldest brother Bevis, and Diana was actually his eldest sister-in-law, and that child was also his nephew. Over the years, he not only impersonated his eldest brother's identity and military merits, but he had also been living with his eldest brother's wife as a couple. Nathan's face turned livid instantly, but before he could say anything, several officers who came over happened to walk up to us and heard these words. One of them was very angry. He immediately turned around and gave orders to the accompanying staff. This is simply lawless. Set up an investigation team immediately and get to the bottom of this matter. Another officer patted Nathan on the shoulder and said, "Nathan, take care of your family first. We will deal with this matter seriously and give your wife and children justice." Nathan nodded and expressed his gratitude to them. After seeing off all the officers and their wives, Nathan's eyes fell on my bandaged wound again. I leaned in Nathan's arms and could feel the slight rise and fall of his chest. His arms were tightly clasped, but he carefully avoided the wound on my body. "It's not your fault. You have protected us very well," I said softly, and my fingers gently smoothed his frown. Nathan rested his chin on the top of my head and exhaled a long breath. The lights in the emergency room were still on. We just stood quietly in the corridor waiting. His hand was always holding mine, giving me every sense of security. The lights in the operating room were finally turned off. The doctor pushed the bed out. A man's little face was pale, with thick gauze wrapped around his head. Traces of stitches can be vaguely seen. The anesthetic effect has not yet worn off. Brian is still in a coma. Nathan and I are standing on both sides of the bed, staring at our Brian intently. 3 hours later, Brian opened his eyes weakly. The first sentence he said was to ask about my situation. "Mom, are you okay?" I hurried forward and held her hand, tears streaming uncontrollably. "Mom is fine. Brian is so brave." Nathan stood on the other side of the bed, reached out, and gently touched Brian's forehead. I noticed that his eyes were red and his voice deeper than usual. "Good job. You protected Mom like a real man." Brian pursed his lips a little embarrassedly and suddenly asked, as if he had just remembered something, "Dad, the military medal that Grandpa left for me was snatched away. I failed to protect it." Nathan immediately interrupted him with a firm tone. "Don't worry. Dad promises he will help you get it back, not just the medal, but also justice." That evening, Nathan returned to the army to deal with Jonathan's case, while I stayed in the hospital with Brian. The ward was very quiet. Only the monitor made a regular beeping sound. Suddenly, Brian spoke. "Mom, is that man really my father?" My hand paused, and the knife peeling the apple froze in midair. The question was too heavy. I didn't know how to answer a 5-year-old child. All along, I had only told him his father was a hero who sacrificed his life for the country. I never even showed him a photo of Jonathan. To Brian, Nathan had always been his only father. Before I could respond, Brian continued, "I don't want that father. He's a bad man. I only want my father." His voice was small but firm. "My father teaches me boxing, takes me fishing, and tells me bedtime stories. He's the best father in the world." My eyes suddenly became wet. I gently held his hand. "Nathan is also the best child in the world." At that moment, the door of the ward was gently pushed open. Nathan stood at the door, holding the hot milk he had just bought. His eyes were red. He had obviously heard the conversation. After the 7th day of my father-in-law's death, the team held a meeting to handle Jonathan's case. The investigation team had uncovered all the facts. He not only used someone else's identity, but was also suspected of multiple crimes, including forgery. On the day of the trial, Nathan and I sat in the gallery. Jonathan was brought in wearing prison clothes. He looked thinner, and his eyes were dazed. When the chief judge announced the revocation of all his military ranks and honors and sentenced him to 12 years in prison, his knees buckled, and he almost collapsed. At that moment, Diana suddenly stood up to testify. Crying bitterly, she said, "I was forced to do this. I want to sue Jonathan for rape. He threatened me with my son's life and forced me to live with him. In fact, his elder brother, Bevis, and I are the ones who truly love each other. If it weren't for him," she choked up and couldn't go on. The courtroom erupted. Jonathan, who had been dejected, suddenly raised his head, eyes red. He struggled to stand but was held down by the bailiff. You? Who climbed into my bed willingly back then? The judge slammed the gavel hard. Silence fell. Diana stood there, shoulders hunched, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes were calm, almost calculating. The judge announced the final verdict. Due to Diana's accusation, Jonathan's sentence was increased by 3 years. The moment the sentence was announced, Jonathan lost control. He suddenly stood up, grasped the railings tightly, and looked around the courtroom with red eyes. Ellie, save me. I'm your husband and Brian's biological father. We're a family. Get me out, and we can live a good life as a family of 3. The bailiffs rushed forward, but he struggled fiercely. I know I was wrong. Let's start over. It took 4 bailiffs to subdue him. When he was dragged out of the court, his prison uniform was torn, but he was still shouting, Ellie, has your conscience been eaten by a dog? His voice echoed in the corridor until the heavy door slammed shut. During the entire sentencing, Nathan held my hand so tightly it hurt. He didn't say a word in court, but I knew he had been hiding his self-blame and guilt deep in his heart. Now he finally saw the people who hurt us pay the price. He was truly relieved. Although Diana wasn't sentenced, she was sent back to her rural hometown. Her family, who had been living off Jonathan's allowance, turned on her as soon as the money stopped. In less than a month, her brother and sister-in-law arranged for her to marry into the poorest family in the village, the Kara family, for a bride price of 3,000 yuan. The Kara family had 5 brothers, the oldest 45 and the youngest in his early 30s. Because of poverty, none had been able to marry. After pooling their money to take Diana as a shared wife, she became not just Jonathan's ex-wife but also the wife of 5 men. The village chief turned a blind eye, calling it tradition. That night, Diana was dragged into the house by the eldest brother. In the days that followed, she became a tool for reproduction. Her son Curtis was also sent to the countryside for primary school. The pampered child finally tasted the pain Brian once suffered. His classmates mocked him. His teachers ignored him. He still shouted every day, "Do you know who my father is?" But no one cared. Instead, they bullied him more. Once a plump, well-fed boy, Curtis quickly became thin, his cheekbones protruding, his clothes ragged. Diana had no time to care for him, and her family treated him as a burden. Villagers often saw him wandering by the river after school, throwing stones, talking to himself, or just sitting there for hours. In the spring of the following year, villagers found his body by the river. Some said he fell accidentally. Others claimed to have seen older kids pushing him. But nothing was ever proven. Diana, who now worked in the fields by day and served different husbands at night, didn't even have time to mourn. Her mother-in-law stared at her belly every day, muttering about wanting a child for each son. In less than half a year, Diana was as haggard as a 40-year-old woman, living with empty eyes. During his imprisonment, Jonathan asked to see his mother and son many times, but Brian and I never went to visit him. He had been completely eliminated from our lives. Nathan and I had another daughter, and the family of 4 lived a stable and happy life. 15 years later, Jonathan was released from prison. By then, Brian was already a handsome military academy student. When he was a child, Brian's appearance did resemble Jonathan's, but as he grew older, his facial features gradually reflected mine, while his upright military posture and firm eyes were completely inherited from Nathan. After Jonathan was released, he went straight to the gate of the military academy to wait. When he saw Brian coming out, he rushed forward and tried to hold Brian's hand. Brian instinctively performed a grappling move and twisted Jonathan's arms behind his back. Jonathan cried out in pain, it hurts, son, it's me. I'm your biological father." Upon hearing this, Brian let go in disgust, his expression cold. "You got the wrong person." Jonathan chased after him relentlessly, shouting, "Son, I'm your biological father. You can't just ignore me. Nathan is just a stepfather. He'll never truly care about you." Before he could finish, man punched him in the face. "Don't let me hear another bad word about my father from your mouth." The guards rushed over at the sound of the commotion and separated them. As Jonathan was taken away, he kept shouting and cursing. "Ungrateful wolf. You deny your real father just because your stepfather is rich. You and your mother have no conscience eats been eaten by dogs. Afterwards, Ahman proactively explained the incident to the school and wrote a self-criticism. Jonathan did not give up. He remained in the city, waiting for Ahman. However, he kept running into trouble. Someone splashed soup on him while he was eating. Someone else ambushed him in an alley and beat him up. The last time, several strangers blocked him and warned that if he dared to trouble Master Nathan again, he would face the consequences. Only then did Jonathan understand Ahman's current status meant he didn't even need to lift a finger. People would naturally take action for him. The next morning, bruised and humiliated, Jonathan boarded a long-distance bus back to his hometown. There, he lived in a rundown house that leaked in both rain and winter. He tried to find villagers to help with repairs, but they avoided him because he had been in prison. He barely survived farming 2 thin acres of land, often eating only 1 meal a day when the harvest was bad. The local shops refused to sell on credit, so he had to walk further to town to buy the cheapest rice and flour. One rainy night, Diana escaped from the Kara family. The years of torture had left her mentally ill. She broke into Jonathan's house with a kitchen knife. During the struggle, Jonathan accidentally strangled her. Old Man Tom, the neighbor, was awakened by the noise and came to check. In the dim light, he saw Jonathan slumped on the ground covered in blood, Diana's lifeless body next to him. Frightened, he ran home and called the police. Given the irrefutable evidence and Jonathan's criminal record, the court quickly sentenced him to death for intentional homicide. On the day of execution, the grounds were eerily quiet. No relatives, no friends, not even anyone to collect the body. When Nathan told Brian and me the news, we didn't react. From the moment Jonathan faked his death, he had nothing to do with us anymore. Time passed and our daughter grew up. I don't know who she inherited it from, but she was a tomboy through and through. One day, after misbehaving, Nathan punished her by sending her to the military camp to be disciplined by her brother. Watching her reluctantly walk away, Nathan suddenly pulled me into the bedroom and said seriously that it was time to have a 3rd child. I couldn't help laughing and lightly hit his shoulder. He was getting old, yet still so playful. But in fact, we both knew he'd had a vasectomy after I gave birth to our daughter. He never forgot the pain I suffered from a difficult labor. After the surgery, he was more anxious than I was and watched over my recovery every day. He gently pressed me down on the bed and kissed my forehead, just to find a reason to hold me. After Brian graduated from the military academy, he became an outstanding officer. Every time he came home, I would see that upright posture and those resolute eyes. She was becoming more and more like his father. Now Nathan and I are both gray-haired. Every morning, he still takes my hand for a walk around the military compound, just as he has for decades. Under the setting sun, our long shadows lean close together, slowly making our way home.